You're looking for an audio interface that just works, something you can plug in, hit record, and feel confident that the sound you get is as honest as the performance you captured. You don't want a list of specs that sound impressive on paper, you want reliability, a workflow that stays out of the way, and a price that makes sense for the results you'll actually hear. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're sitting in a home studio or a small professional space, the first thing you notice about the Apple x8p Gen 2 is how quickly it drops into your session. The Thunderbolt 3 connection means you're not fighting latency, and the moment you launch your DAW, the 200+ UAD plugins are already available. That's a big part of why many engineers gravitate toward this box. You get a full DSP engine baked right into the hardware, so you can run classic analog emulations without taxing your computer's CPU. In real-world use, that translates to being able to put a vintage compressor on a vocal track, listen to the effect in real time, and still have headroom for the rest of the mix. The auto gain feature is one of those little things that feels like it was designed after actually watching people fumble with input levels. You line up a few microphones or line inputs, hit the button, and the interface walks through each source, setting a sensible gain that leaves you with a clean, usable signal. In practice, that cuts down the turn it up until it clips routine that can eat minutes out of a session, especially when you're tracking a full band and need to swing between drums, guitars, and vocals in quick succession. If you've ever tried to coax low end from a mix on a small monitor setup, you'll appreciate the bass management routing that lets you feed a subwoofer directly from the unit. The result isn't a gimmick. You get that extra depth that makes the kick drum feel punchy and the bass guitar sit solidly without having to resort to heavy EQ tricks later. For producers who build tracks that rely on that foundation, think hip-hop, electronic, or cinematic scores, the ability to hear the sub-frequency content while you're still in the tracking phase can change how you balance the rest of the arrangement. Now, who should actually consider spending on this piece of gear? If you run a project-oriented home studio, you already own a decent DAW and maybe a couple of outboard pieces, but you find yourself wishing you could access UAD's classic emulations without a separate rack. If you regularly track multiple sources at once, say a full drum kit, a guitar amp, and several vocal mics, the 8 analog inputs and 8 line outputs give you the flexibility to keep everything separate and route it cleanly. Engineers who need to move between mixing and mastering on the same machine also benefit from the low latency monitoring and the fact that the DSP processing stays consistent from the moment you record to the moment you bounce. On the other side of the coin, there are clear reasons to walk away. The price point sits well above entry-level interfaces, and the performance gains are most noticeable when you're actually using the UAD plugins or need that ultra-wide dynamic range for critical listening. If you're a bedroom producer who mostly works with software synths and a pair of headphones, you might get more mileage out of a smaller, less expensive Thunderbolt 2 or even a USB-C interface. Also, because the unit relies on Thunderbolt 3, you'll need a relatively recent laptop or desktop. Older rigs will either require an adapter that can introduce its own latency or simply won't support the full bandwidth, which defeats the purpose of buying a high-end device. There are some hidden trade-offs that only become clear after you've got the box on your desk. The Apollo x8p Gen 2 is a fairly large chassis, so you'll need a dedicated rack space or a sturdy desktop shelf. Its power draw is higher than many compact units, meaning you should be on a reliable power line and, if you're using a laptop, a quality power adapter to avoid any dropouts. The software suite that comes with it, UAD console and the plugin manager, is powerful, but it adds a layer of learning. New users can feel a bit overwhelmed the first time they try to route signals through the console view, especially when dealing with the combination of native and DS-based plugins. That's not a flaw, just a reality check. The interface rewards those who invest time in mastering its workflow. From the perspective of sound quality, the next-generation conversion claim isn't just marketing fluff. When you compare a raw acoustic guitar recorded through the Apollo to the same source through a mid-tier USB interface, the difference in clarity, especially in the quietest passages, is audible. The dynamic range is wide enough that you